Donald Trump could only keep us distracted from the Epstein files for so long before US and independent media began covering what is the biggest story of corruption in this administration. Now, it is not a surprise that we have gone back to talking about it since Donald Trump has seemingly moved off of Greenland now that he has surrendered to Europe. But what is surprising to me is the mega figures who are talking about Epstein once again, and especially Joe Rogan, who just admitted the secret that we have all known for some time about Donald Trump, Epstein, but especially Ghislain Maxwell, that is making this cover-up so much more difficult for Donald Trump. But it all begins with a hearing yesterday in the House Oversight Committee in which Republicans tried to shift focus from Bill Clinton. But some news about Ghislain Maxwell came out that has prompted what Rogan said, what he's leaking, what he's sharing. And it all begins with Robert Garcia and a broader picture about how we're getting here and what Rogan had to say.
Because, quote, my friends will get hurt. Donald Trump is leading a White House cover-up right now of the Epstein files. And we all know that Epstein himself said that Donald Trump was his best friend for over 10 years. And it is shameful, illegal, and unconstitutional that the Department of Justice has released 1% of the files. 1% of the files. Where is the pressure to get Pam Bondi to release the files? Instead, you're focused, and the committee's focused, on whoever you perceive to be your enemies, and the enemies of Donald Trump. Because let's be clear, we want to talk to President Bill Clinton. We want him to answer our questions. We also want Ghislain Maxwell to answer our questions. We also want to understand why Pam Bondi refuses to release all the files. 1% of the files have released. Millions have been left. No publications for weeks. That is a crime. And so this White House cover-up continues every single day that the files are not released.
So we know that Donald Trump is covering up. I don't think that that is a point of contention anymore. I don't think anybody is struggling to wrap their head around that. Donald Trump and his best friend of a decade in a woman in Ghislain Maxwell, who he flew around on private jets with without Epstein being there. So they were just hanging out independently. Ghislain Maxwell, of course, the right-hand woman of Jeffrey Epstein. And now, we know more, according to Robert Garcia, that Mar-a-Lago was a hub for Epstein's trafficking. So, yeah, I don't think anyone at this point is debating the efficacy of the fact that Donald Trump was deeply and intimately involved in this pedo ring, and certainly is leading the cover-up. But not just in his current administration, in the last one as well. And that's what Donald Trump doesn't want us to pay attention to. That is certainly why he doesn't want Ghislain Maxwell speaking out anymore, which she is going to be. Donald Trump also doesn't want Republicans speaking out so much, so that he's still criticizing Thomas Massie. And it's an important how Donald Trump criticized him before we get to what Rogan said. 'Cause it all ties in now that MAGA is revolting.
You'll end up paying less money. You'll have much better health. They're going to go out and buy their own health care.
So do you
think of it. They'll have better health care for less money.
Do you think we'll see another reconciliation plan? Do you want that?
I'd like to see it. It's hard when you have a majority by 3. You know, it's hard because you have a guy like this loser, Massey. He's a real loser. And you have other guys that just automatically vote. No, Rand Paul. I always got along well with Rand Paul, but he's always, no vote. Someday you're going to have to explain it. Some psychiatrist ought to go see him. Even a really great vote, they just vote no. I don't know what it is. I think they get good publicity. They really don't. They hurt the country because if you're voting no, then you're giving the Democrats and socialism and communism, frankly, because you have communists, frankly. I mean, when you look at some of the plans being put out by them, these are communists. These aren't socialists. These are communists.
A loser. That is what Thomas Massie is to Donald Trump for standing up and saying in a clear voice, maybe it's time for some accountability for the pedo protectors. But Donald Trump, he said it. And in a way, that's very important to the point that Rogan brought up, and what he shared about Maxwell and Epstein and some coming breaking news is that Donald Trump kind of couched that criticism of Massie. We know he really hates. Because of the Epstein files in some larger, they hate America, sentiment about Republicans voting against his legislation that runs up the deficit. Donald Trump is saying that they hate America and he's shifting the focus, right? and he's assigning the blame in something different so he can give himself a bit of a cop-out. And that's exactly what he did back when the Epstein files were supposed to be released the first time. Of course, Donald Trump since then has been distracting away. And that's exactly what Rogan admitted that he believes and is going to be a problem come February 8th. But we'll get into why. Listen to Rogan though.
I mean, they said they released them, but what did they release?
No, they're still not all out yet.
But what did they release?
Yeah.
Like, it's weird. The whole thing's weird.
It reminds me of that Onion article where they're like, "Oh, CIA realizes they've been using a black highlighter this entire time." Like, it's like that. It's like, oh, okay, you just blacked out pages,
redacted the shit out of everything.
Yeah.
It's like, what did they release? Did they release something recently?
No, they haven't released anything in a minute. They had that initial release where everything was blacked out, and it was that picture of Winnie the Pooh, which was hilarious.
But isn't there talk about some new releases that are happening soon?
Have they? It feels like everything's been drowned out by everything else been going on with like the Somalians and the ICE shooting. It feels like that's completely drowned out anything about it.
I think some of that's on purpose.
First of all, hey, you big dummy, Donald Trump has used you to distract in the past as well. He is admitting that Donald Trump is using Somali fraud and these ICE invasions as a way to shift our focus. Joe Rogan, who was intimately involved in the media operation of Donald Trump's campaign and does propaganda for free for Donald Trump, because Joe Rogan bites on all these stories, is now waking up to the fact that he is another cog in the machine, that he is another pawn in the game. Yet you admitted that. But you're off. You're a part of it. So what does this have to do with Ghislain Maxwell? Well, Joe Rogan is bringing up the fact that ever since the Epstein files were set to be released, the deadline was a month ago, and it passed. Donald Trump is Goddess Greenland. On the very day that the Epstein files were supposed to come out, that kid, Nick Shirley, who did his very fraudulent and misrepresented Somali fraud story and posted it, and everyone in right-wing media jumped on it. But there's another deadline coming up for Donald Trump, and that is February 8th, where we started this video, right? Where Robert Garcia and the House Oversight Committee are moving to depose Ghislain Maxwell. That is the next deadline that is coming up. And I can promise you, on February 8th, there will be some wild right-wing culture war story that Joe Rogan will likely bite on. Because he's dumb enough to admit that Donald Trump is secretly pumping out these stories and coming up with these things for the media to cover. Well, he falls for the trap every single time. But I can guarantee you, at the start of next month, call it February 4th, 5th, 6th, Donald Trump is going to be rolling out something new. Donald Trump is going to want to invade Iceland, or he's going to make some major announcement. He's going to launch new tariffs, that there will be something with China. You just wait and see. There will be some story that Donald Trump feeds. Sure, his right-wing media propagandist, but people like Joe Rogan who will bite on it. People like Joe Rogan who will buy into it as legitimate and not just a tool for Donald Trump to shift our focus. Joe Rogan is admitting that Donald Trump uses these peripheral stories to distract us from the main problem, which is the Epstein files. But still he continues, man, I can't even speak. He continues to fall for this. It's hard being a podcaster. Joe Rogan knows no seriously. That's what he does. He still falls for it. He knows what he's doing. He's realized it. He's admitted it. Maybe I'll trim that out. Because the cover UPS gonna continue. And we're gonna continue to call it out one of the best Democrats. I think what she said yesterday kind of went under the radar. Melanie Stansbury made an excellent point on so much of this in a clip. You should really watch till the end.
And on the day, the final deadline, that they were supposed to release their final explanation about why they may have redacted some files, and in fact they have, as has been stated many times, only released less than 1% of the files, Donald Trump used the United States military to invade a foreign country and steal their oil. And while we're sitting here and our colleagues are trying to create a spectacle for the media, every single newspaper in the United States and the world's headline is about how Donald Trump right now is in Europe, embarrassing the United States. How he is threatening our NATO allies to invade Greenland. Humiliating the United States. And I have to say, I was home over the weekend for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebrations to honor the life and legacy of Dr. King. And the question that I got over and over again from my constituents is what is in those files that is so bad that President Trump is invading Venezuela, threatening our NATO allies, and sending thousands of armed paramilitary troops onto our streets to create violence and chaos in American cities. That is what the American people are actually asking us. And so I will be honest, Mr. Chairman, I am deeply troubled that the individuals who are the subject of today's hearing did not appear on their scheduled date. No one is above the law. But I do know, based on the correspondence, that they have been corresponding with you regularly to try to resolve this issue. But I don't believe that's what this hearing is actually about. Because if it was actually about getting justice and about getting the truth, we would have DOJ here. We would be holding Pam Bondi in contempt, and we would be hearing from the survivors themselves. And so I have to agree with my colleagues that I believe that this is part of an extended smokescreen to try to cover things up.
It is distraction after distraction. That is the point. That is what they want to accomplish. But it kind of does. It requires us to connect the dots. You know, I think Gavin Newsom said it yesterday, talking about Greenland. Donald Trump was never gonna do this, and he's pathetic. There's no strength. Trump, he's insecure. He was never gonna go forward. But it is important to keep in mind that sometimes the distractions, there's something behind them. All right, Trump wasn't gonna invade Greenland, but he certainly caused irreparable damage to our alliances with those threats. We gotta keep it all in mind, but we gotta call it out. We're certainly going to on this show. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. Leave a like on this video. If you stuck around at the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let him silence you, and until next time, I'll see you soon.